We have a lot of stories that start with shouting. This one doesn't. This one starts with a table set like nothing bad could happen, and a child trying to be polite in a room that had already decided where she ranked. Naomi Calder is a single mom raising her daughter the best she can, and what happened at one Sunday dinner mattered because it didn't just bruise her pride, it reached straight for her kid's sense of worth. Here's where she begins. I knew the moment I walked in that my mother had set the table on purpose. The good plates, the cloth napkins folded tight, the kind of meal that always came with invisible rules. My daughter Iris stayed close to my side until my sister Marissa swept in with her usual perfume and her usual confidence, kissing our mother on the cheek like she owned the room. "There's my girl," my mother Elaine murmured, and I watched Iris register that tone. Warm, automatic, like it cost my mother nothing. My brother Luke was already at the table. My father Thomas sat at the far end, carving into his steak with that steady focus he had when he didn't want to look up. Iris climbed into her chair and tried to do everything right. Back straight, hands in her lap. She took a few bites of the vegetables, even though she didn't like them, because she knew what my mother was like about wasting food. Then she saw the dessert on the counter, chocolate cake under a glass dome. Iris's voice came out small but clear. "Grandma, may I have some cake, please?" My mother didn't even turn her head. She kept swirling her wine like she was thinking about something important. Premium treats are for children who understand standards. The room went quiet in that way people do when they're waiting to see who's going to fix it. Marissa laughed first. Not a big laugh. Just enough to make it safe to laugh. "Oh my God, Mom," Marissa said, already sliding a slice onto her own plate. "That's hilarious." Luke smirked. "She's joking. Don't make it weird." I looked toward my father. He kept chewing, eyes down, like he hadn't heard a thing. Iris stared at the cake, then at her own plate, then at me. Her face didn't crumble. She just got very still, like she was trying to understand what rule she had broken. I reached for her hand under the table and felt her fingers go cold against mine. "We're going," I told my mother, keeping my voice even. Elaine finally glanced over. "You just got here. We've had enough family time for today." Marissa tilted her head, smiling like I'd done something embarrassing. "You're seriously leaving over cake." "It's not about cake. From our side, the moment didn't look loud. It looked final. The way Naomi kept moving while everyone else stayed seated. I helped Iris into her coat slowly, button by button, because my hands were shaking and I didn't want her to see it. Behind us, my mother's chair scraped. "You're raising her to be entitled." I turned back once. I'm raising her to notice when she's being ranked. Then I took Iris's hand and walked out. If you want to keep listening, staying with us helps more than you think. The drive home was quiet in the way that isn't peaceful. I kept both hands on the wheel even though my fingers felt stiff, like I might drop it if I loosened my grip. Iris sat in the back seat with her coat still on, staring out the window. She didn't cry. That almost made it worse. At the first stoplight, I reached back and touched her knee, just to check. She flinched a little, then leaned into my hand. "I wasn't trying to be bad," she said after a minute. Her voice was careful, like she was choosing each word. "I know." I told her, "You didn't do anything wrong." She nodded, but she didn't look convinced. We drove another block before she spoke again. "If I try harder, will Grandma like me?" The question landed heavy. Not loud, just heavy. The kind of thing you feel in your chest before your brain catches up. I pulled over without really thinking about it, parked, turned around in my seat so I could see her face. "You don't need to try harder," I told her. "You're already enough." She watched me closely, like she was checking for cracks. She likes Marissa's kids. They're good at sitting still. I took a breath. Being liked isn't something you earn by being quiet. She thought about that. Then, very softly, "Maybe I can practice." That was the moment I knew this wasn't just about my mother being cruel at dinner. This had been building, little corrections, Little looks. The kind that sneak into a kid's head and rearrange things without anyone noticing. I unbuckled and opened her door. "Come sit up here for a second." She climbed into the front seat and curled into me like she used to when she was smaller. I could feel her heart racing through her jacket. "We don't practice for love," I said into her hair. "Love doesn't work like that." She didn't answer, but her breathing slowed. When we got home, I made her some toast even though it was late. She ate it at the counter, crumbs everywhere, like she'd forgotten how to be careful. I let it happen. Before bed. She asked if she could sleep with the hallway light on. I said yes without hesitation. After I tucked her in, I stood in the doorway longer than usual, listening until her breathing evened out. Then I went into my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened my laptop. Not because I wanted to start a fight, because something had already started, and I wasn't going to pretend it hadn't. The next morning, Iris moved slower than usual. She sat at the kitchen table in her pajamas, spoon resting in her cereal like she'd forgotten what it was for. When I reminded her we were going to be late, she nodded and didn't move. I crouched beside her chair. "Hey, what stuck?" She shrugged, eyes fixed on the bowl. I was thinking about Grandma's house. I didn't rush to answer. That felt important. "I don't like when everyone eats before me." She added, "It makes my stomach hurt." I knew exactly what she meant. Not hunger. The other kind. There had been other dinners, other holidays, little things that stacked quietly. The time she'd been told to sit at the small table in the corner because the older cousins were having grown-up conversation. The Thanksgiving when plates were passed down to her already half cleared, with a smile and a comment about not being picky. The afternoon my mother pinched Iris's cheek in front of everyone and said she was pretty, just not in a striking way, like me. At the time, I'd swallowed it, redirected, told myself I was being sensitive. Now, Iris was repeating it back to me in pieces. At school, drop-off. She held my hand longer than usual. When she finally let go, she hesitated, then leaned in and whispered, "I'll try to be good today." The words followed me all the way back to the car. I sat there for a minute before starting the engine. Then I pulled up the email I'd been putting off opening. The therapist had responded the night before. Warm, direct, a few available times. She asked what had prompted the referral. I stared at the screen, fingers hovering. Then I typed, "Not everything, just enough." Patterns, family gatherings, a child starting to believe affection had rules. At lunch, my sister Marissa texted like nothing had happened. "Mom feels bad. You made it awkward." I didn't answer. Later that afternoon, my father called. His voice was calm, like he was discussing the weather. "Your mother didn't mean it the way you took it." I leaned against the counter, watching the kettle heat. How did she mean it? Then, a pause. She has standards. The kettle clicked off. I didn't pour it. "Iris is 8. Another pause. Longer this time. "You're overcorrecting." I thought about the way Iris had curled into me the night before, the way she'd asked if she could practice being liked. "I'm correcting," I said, and ended the call. That evening, Iris showed me a drawing from school, a row of stick figures holding hands. One was smaller, off to the side. "That one's me." She said, "I didn't know where to put myself. I put the drawing on the fridge anyway." After she went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and my mail spread out around it. Bank statements, old notices, things I'd ignored because I didn't want to start something. I wasn't angry, not yet, but I was done pretending this was new. Something had been wrong for a long time. I'd just been trained not to name it. I was half asleep when my phone lit up. Not buzzing, just the screen, face down on the nightstand, glowing like it wanted to be noticed without making noise. I reached for it anyway. Old habit. Elaine's name sat at the top of the screen. "We should talk about the house paperwork soon. The estate planning meeting is coming up, and I'd like things to be clean before then. The timestamp read 11:52. I stared at the message longer than I needed to, not because it was surprising, because it was familiar. That tone, calm, managerial, like everything already belonged to her and she was just looping me in as a courtesy. I didn't answer. I set the phone back down and listened to the apartment, the refrigerator hum, a car passing outside, Iris shifting in her sleep down the hall. After a minute, I picked the phone up again, not to respond, to open my email. Earlier that week, my bank had sent a routine notice, one of those messages you skim and archive without thinking. I hadn't archived it. Something about it had felt off. An account number I didn't recognize, a balance that didn't match my memory. I opened my laptop and logged in. The screen took a second to load, long enough for my stomach to tighten. There it was again, a line item tied to the house I grew up in. Not new, old, quietly sitting there like it had always been mine to explain. I pulled up the credit report I'd downloaded and never really looked at. Scrolled past the obvious things. Student loans long paid off. The mortgage on my first condo. Then I saw it. A loan I had never signed for. A date that went back years. I leaned back in the chair, one hand pressed flat against the table. The wood felt cool. Solid. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't sloppy paperwork. It was a signature that looked like mine and wasn't. I closed the laptop and sat there in the dark. Elaine's message still unread on my phone. Clean, she'd said. I picked the phone up one last time and turned it face down. Some things don't get cleaned up with a conversation. I didn't sleep much after that. By morning, the apartment felt tighter, as if the walls had shifted overnight. Iris was already dressed when I came into the kitchen, her backpack zipped and her hair still a little wild. She watched me pour coffee and didn't say a word. At drop-off, she hugged me longer than usual. When she finally pulled back, she gave me a small nod, a silent pact between us that the world outside was ours to manage. I drove straight to my office. I shut the door, turned off the overhead light, and opened my laptop. This time, I didn't just skim. I performed a forensic audit of my own life. I pulled every document I could find: loan statements, old disclosures, and title records for the Wilmette property. The home equity line of credit wasn't recent. It dated back 8 years. The balance had shifted over time, drawn and paid down like someone tending a private garden. Then I saw the closing documents. The signature at the bottom was slanted like mine, with the same looped first initial. But the ink felt like a betrayal. I knew my own handwriting, and more importantly, I knew I hadn't been in Illinois on the date of that signing. I called Helen, my attorney. I found it, I said. They forged my name on a second mortgage. Email me the scan and the notary block, Helen instructed. Her voice was sharp, professional. An hour later, she called back. Naomi, this is a serious felony. But more importantly, because you only discovered this discrepancy 48 hours ago, the statute of limitations hasn't even begun to run. Under the discovery rule, you have full standing to contest this. How did they get it notarized without me? I asked. The notary is an old family friend of theirs, Helen replied. That's another layer of liability. This creates a clouded title. Any attempt they make at estate planning or selling is dead in the water until you are satisfied. That afternoon, my father called. We need to talk about the dinner incident, he said, his voice weary. Your mother is upset. There is more than one incident now. Dad, I said, my voice as steady as a heartbeat. We should meet. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock. We sat across from each other at their dining table. The good china was absent, replaced by heavy silence. I slid the printed loan documents across the wood. Elaine's eyes scanned the page, her knuckles turning white as she gripped her mug. Thomas leaned forward, his face a mask of practiced calm. This is a misunderstanding regarding family assets. It isn't a misunderstanding, I said quietly. This signature is a forgery. You used my credit and my stake in this house to fund a lifestyle you couldn't afford, and you bypassed a notary to do it. Elaine set the paper down slowly. We needed the line of credit for Marissa's tuition and the roof repairs. You weren't around, Naomi. You were always so distant. I was your daughter, I replied, and you treated my identity like an ATM. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Helen's words echoed in my mind. Criminal exposure. Zero leverage. For the first time in 32 years, I didn't look away. I waited, and for the first time, they were the ones who had no answer. The meeting didn't end with yelling. That surprised me. My mother gathered the forged documents into a neat stack, aligning the corners as if order could fix the fracture in our foundation. My father leaned back, arms crossed, staring at the ceiling as if searching for a script that would make him the hero again. This doesn't need to get ugly. Naomi, Elaine said at last. Her voice had shifted, no longer dismissive, but calculating. It already is. I replied. I wasn't being sharp. I was being factual. She glanced at Thomas. He cleared his throat, his posture stiff. We assumed you would talk to us as a family before doing anything drastic. We thought we had an understanding. I sent notices, I said. 3 of them. Elaine waved a hand dismissively. Those looked like generic legal threats. You have always had a flair for the dramatic. I didn't argue. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder containing the certified mail receipts. I laid them out 3 white slips with clear dates and signatures of receipt, proof that the truth had been sitting on their doorstep for 42 days. Thomas frowned, looking at the slips. We don't open everything that looks like junk mail. That landed heavier than he intended. It was the confession of a man who believed himself above the law because he chose to ignore it. They had received the court summons for the petition for partition by sale weeks ago. They had seen the warnings regarding the clouded title. They had simply decided that looking at the consequences would make them too uncomfortable. Helen's advice echoed in my mind. Don't make it about revenge, she had told me. Make it about a resolution. I slid a new document across the table, a formal settlement agreement. I am not here to punish you. I am here to clean up the financial mess you made using my name. This agreement outlines a choice. Elaine's jaw tightened. And what is this choice? You sign a limited power of attorney for real estate. I said, it gives me the authority to sell the property at fair market value, satisfy the $265,000 debt you incurred, and distribute the remaining shares of 100% of the equity according to the original deed. Thomas scanned the page, his finger stopping on a clause near the bottom. This gives you total control over the closing process. Yes, because I am the only one capable of ensuring the title is cleared properly. And if we refuse, Elaine asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. Then the partition suit moves to open court, I said, meeting her gaze. And the forgery of my signature becomes part of the public record. Criminal investigators tend to take an interest in 8-year-long bank fraud. The silence that followed was thicker than anything I had ever felt in that house. Thomas stood and paced to the window, looking out at the manicured lawn. We didn't think it mattered, he muttered. You're our daughter. What's ours is yours. Except the debt, I countered. That was only mine. Elaine reached for the pen. Her hand shook just slightly as she scrawled her name. Thomas followed, his signature heavy and defeated. As I gathered the papers, Elaine looked up, her eyes glossy with a mix of fear and resentment. You didn't have to do it this way, Naomi. You left me no other way, I said. As I walked out, I saw the stack of unopened envelopes by the door, the court seals still bright and mocking. They hadn't been blindsided. They had simply chosen to stay blind. The house sold faster than anyone expected. I handled the calls, the paperwork, and the relentless back and forth with the title company, acting under the limited power of attorney. I signed only where the law permitted. I ensured the $265,000 loan was paid off first, followed by the closing fees and taxes. Then, the remaining equity was distributed precisely as the original deed required. I didn't tell my family when it closed. I didn't need to. The silence of an empty bank account would speak for itself. They found out through their own prying. It started with my brother, Luke, calling in the middle of a weekday. "Hey," he said, his voice tight with forced casualness. "A random question. Why does your name come up as the registered agent for a bunch of property addresses in the county database?" I watched Iris color at the table. She had switched to a deep purple for the dog she kept drawing over and over. "What search were you running, Luke?" A pause. "Public records. I was looking into the house sale." I didn't rush to fill the silence. Luke kept talking, his agitation growing. "There are limited liability companies attached, 4 of them, but the mailing address for the legal filings is your private post office box." "They are mine," I said. "You never said anything." "I never hid it. My filings have been a matter of public record for over a decade." "That afternoon," Marissa texted. "So, this whole time you've been pretending to struggle?" I typed back slowly. "I have been living within my means while you spent 100% of yours on appearances." She called immediately. "You let Mom think you were barely making it." "I let her think whatever she wanted," I said. "She never asked because she was too busy ranking me at the bottom." Marissa scoffed. "You own 4 rental properties. How long?" 12 years. I started with the $38,000 Grandma left me the inheritance you spent on a luxury car in 6 months. I could hear her recalculating her entire life, realizing that while she was playing the golden child, I had been building a fortress. That evening, my father left a voicemail. "We didn't know you had resources. Naomi, things might have been different if we knew you were successful." I deleted it. They weren't sorry for the cruelty. They were sorry they had miscalculated who held the power. The call came just after lunch, right when I was answering emails and pretending the day was normal. "This is the front office at Iris's school," the woman said, her voice polite but strained. "Your mother, Elaine Calder, is here. She is claiming there is an urgent family medical emergency and insists she is authorized to pick Iris up." My stomach dropped, but my voice remained like stone. "She is not on the authorized pickup list. Under no circumstances is she to have contact with my daughter." There was a pause, the sound of papers shifting and a door clicking shut in the background. "That matches our records. Ms. Calder. However, she is being quite insistent and is demanding to speak with the principal. I am on my way," I said, already grabbing my keys. The drive to Wilmette felt like an eternity, every one of the 6 red lights stretching into minutes. When I pulled into the lot, Elaine was standing just inside the glass doors of the vestibule. She was dressed in an expensive wool coat, her handbag tucked under her arm as if her social standing were a master key. She saw me, and her face twisted into a mask of relief. "Thank God, Naomi," she said, her voice loud enough for the staff to hear. "There has been a ridiculous misunderstanding. Tell these people who I am." The secretary looked between us, her hand hovering near the security buzzer. "We cannot release a student without written authorization. It is 100% against school safety protocol." Elaine smiled tightly. That sharp, practiced social smile. "I am her grandmother. I have lived in this district for over 30 years. "I know who you are," the woman replied, calm and firm. "But your name is not on the list." Elaine turned to me, dropping the facade. "Naomi, stop this. This is embarrassing." I stepped into her personal space, keeping my voice low so only she could hear. "You don't get to invent emergencies to bypass my boundaries anymore. You are not an emergency contact. You are a stranger to this building." Her eyes flicked toward the hallway. "I just wanted to see her. After the house. After everything. You owe me a chance to explain. I don't owe you access to my child's peace of mind, I said. The secretary cleared her throat. Mrs. Calder, I am going to have to ask you to leave the premises immediately. Elaine's hand tightened around her purse until her knuckles were white. I have standing in this community. I know the board members. We follow protocol, not social standing, the secretary said, her finger finally pressing the button. A security guard appeared at the side door, gentle but unmistakable in his intent. Elaine glanced at him, then back at me, her voice dropping to a hiss. You're afraid she isn't premium enough for this school either, aren't you? I met her gaze without blinking. You were afraid she wasn't premium enough for your table. Mother, she is certainly not available for your image repair. That landed with the weight of a physical blow. Elaine turned and walked out, her heels clicking sharply against the tile. When Iris finally ran toward me, smelling of crayons and glue, I knelt and held her like she was the only thing that mattered. Grandma came. She whispered into my shoulder. I know, I said. You came faster, she said, pulling back to look at me. I will always come faster, I promised. 100% of the time. Elaine came to my office 2 weeks later. Security called first, asked if I wanted to let her up. I said 5 minutes. No more. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not fragile. Just reduced. She sat across from me and folded her hands like she'd rehearsed the posture. I've been thinking, she began. About Iris. About what I said. I waited. She slid an envelope across the desk. Thick. Heavy. This is for her education. 1 year. The private academy near us. I checked. I opened it after she stopped talking. The check was for $18,500. Neatly written, calculated. This isn't an apology, I said, placing it back on the desk between us. It's insurance. Her mouth tightened. You're being unfair. I'm being accurate. Elaine looked past me, out the window. People are asking questions, she said quietly. About the house. About why we moved. There it was. I leaned back in my chair. Iris is in therapy now. Thursdays after school. She talks about food a lot. And tables. And trying not to take up space. Elaine's breath caught. Just a little. If you want any place in her life, I continued, you pay for that. You show up when the therapist says it's appropriate. You listen. You don't correct. You don't explain. You don't defend yourself. And the money? She asked. I pushed the envelope back toward her. That goes into her account after the first appointment you attend. She nodded. Too quickly. Our time was up. I stood. She did too. At the door, she turned. I never meant to hurt her. I know, I said. You just didn't think she'd notice. After she left, I deposited the check exactly where I said I would. Then I didn't call her. That weekend, Iris and I went to the shelter near the highway. She knelt in front of a crate and held her fingers out, steady and patient. The dog pressed his nose against them, tail thumping once, then again. He likes me, she whispered. Yes, I told her. He does. We named him Oliver. He followed her everywhere like she'd always belonged to him. That night, Iris taped her old drawing to the fridge. The stick figures were uneven. The space where Grandma had been stayed empty. I like it better this way, she said, stepping back to look. So did I. I deleted the family group chat the same evening. No announcement, no explanation. Just quiet. For a long time. I thought being strong meant enduring. Staying seated. Not making scenes. Not asking for cake. Now I know better. Naomi Calder doesn't measure love by who offers it or under what conditions. She measures it by who shows up when it matters. And who doesn't need to be convinced. If this story stayed with you, walking alongside us for a while makes a difference. From where we're standing, the ending doesn't look loud or triumphant. it looks like a woman choosing what she carries forward and what she finally sets down.